public cycle and the work we're doing across our 3 program enhancement areas. And we wanted to just give time to that today, and we're grateful that you all are here. Next slide. And thank you all for joining. Everyone's muted upon entry, but as you know, there's a lot of open conversation. All calls are recorded. Recordings are available on the Gravity Confluence page following. Everyone's encouraged to actively participate in the discussion, and please send chats to everybody. Next slide. And then we are a standards development initiative, so we do follow antitrust practices, and everyone who participates in the meetings in any way has a responsibility to comply fully with federal and state antitrust laws. And this just means we apply this really generally, that anyone, this is not only direct avoidance of antitrust behaviors, but also avoidance of anything that might be construed as antitrust related. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to go, our overview section is really tidy. Again, this is mission enhancements today, because we have been around long enough that we're not only building new domain work as we are in the alternating call, we're also refining and improving what we have created prior. And we do that in an open and consensus method as well. And the fact is we have 2 meetings because we simply cannot fit it all into one meeting. It's too much. Next slide. Next slide. And this is, I'm going to repeat, this is where we repeat what Lucy was mentioning there. So we have two calls every week, Thursday, 4 to 5:30 Eastern Standard Time in this space in this meeting link. New domains call focuses every other week on development of new domain data standards and value sets. The enhancements call, this call, focuses on enhancing the terminology we've created for previously identified domains, creating additional solutions for members and implementers. Our technical work stream always meets Wednesdays 1 to 2 Eastern Standard Time. Implementation work stream is now quarterly. We just had our first implementation work stream meeting where Corinne and Demry Corinne's our program manager, and Demry from Civitas helped kick us off. And then we're now quarterly, so we'll reconvene again in May. My old dog just sneezed. We'll convene in May and then August. And then we're quarterly now, just again trying to reflect where we are with our implementation journey. There's a lot of activity happening at HIMSS for those of you who are going. From the Gravity leadership team, we have Corey and Vanessa Candelora going. And we have a bunch of members going. So we have 2 different Gravity sessions specifically, but then we also are speaking at the HL7 booth. You can find it all on the HIMSS app if you're going to HIMSS. Find us there if you want to. Again, Corey and Vanessa will be there for the team. Next slide. It's going to be a lot of Sarah talking today. I'm sorry. Any questions on the updates or announcements? Please interrupt me if you want to, just because we really want to make sure that we're having conversations. Next slide. All right, so this is the Gravity Project overview. Again, our vision's a little bit in progress, but Gravity Project strives to create a world where health and social care organizations readily share the information needed to effectively meet the social needs of individuals, advance health equity, and improve outcomes in communities by using standard terminology and technology. Next slide. Gravity Project members and sponsors are here. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without you all. We have both classic HL7 accelerator payment models for for membership, and then we also have designated members, which are community-based organizations and patients who are really critical, obviously, to ensuring that what we do is correct and strategically meeting the needs of all individuals within the social care ecosystem. Next slide. Our 2025 roadmap is follows. So we're in the light green section on Gravity terminology. Again, coding for food, which is we're not focusing on today. Program enhancements and just general enhancements. So this meeting is the cycle where if there's new concepts that we need to bring to bear, or if there's like a new syntax in our terminology structure, we'll vet that all with you here. And then the technical work stream is working on initiatives in the technical call, and the implementation work stream, as I just mentioned, is meeting quarterly. Next slide. All right. We, again, ever so more important, we're not going to do a meeting without stating these each time. The Gravity has data use principles for equitable health and social care. This includes improving personal health outcomes, improving population health equity, ensuring personal control, designing appropriate solutions, ensuring accountability, and preventing, reducing, and remediating harm. All of our principles and deeper description of the rationale are available on the Confluence. Next slide. This is kind of me bumping out our model. We presented this last time. So we all have these base 4 activities that we've been oriented on within our terminology work stream, like standardized instruments, diagnoses and condition statements, goals to use for care planning, and interventions. Some of what we're working on right now starts to at least enhance and sometimes kind of break that activity framework, because in this meeting specifically, we're leaning into trying to figure out what terminology and approach we need to document enrollment in a program. And that is not really clearly represented here because it's not a diagnosis, even though it's in the same kind of class of information in a terminology way. And then we also are working on expanding concepts within HCPCS, within coding for food. So we're starting to kind of strain the original 4 activities that we had by design, like by necessity, as we try to lean into additional solutions to meet implementer needs. Next slide. And then again, you all know this by now. So this is the base core activities and how the terminology that we develop fits in there. And again, this is not reflecting the enrollment concepts that are in the other on the other model. Next slide. Okay, so we have, again, coding for food. We're not focusing on it today because we just kicked off, and we're going to come back with some initial definitions, concepts, parameters when we see you in 2 weeks. But we are going to go through some concepts and enhancement, including the classification, and a little bit more information and how to engage in the work of the Open Social Care Program classification today than we had last time. Next slide. Any questions on the orientation bit? Probably not. Okay, so we're going to keep on going. Next slide. All right, program enhancements. This is the topic of the day. And again, I do not see that this will take more than like 40 minutes or so. So hopefully we'll get up early and let you all get into your days. Next slide. What are the base concepts within the program enhancement work? So sorry, this slide hadn't been, I took some text out there and I didn't fix it. So I shouldn't have said it's not, this still has summer language on it, so my apologies. So Gravity is leaning into 3 core areas of enhancing our program terminology driven by member needs and member questions. So implementer needs and implementer questions in addition to members. So one of them is collating a really comprehensive view on the programs we have, so that social care experts and community-based organizations can see whether they are there or not, or experts in community programs can look and see whether they're correctly defined, and we can ensure that there's clarity and in a comprehensive way on all the programs Gravity has defined over the course of our 5-year term. Another is developing the open consensus program classification of Gravity programs for the purposes of navigation and connection. So that area of enhancement, again, takes those core programs that we have defined over the course of our 5 years and starts organizing them within a structure for navigation and connection to services. And the last one, as I mentioned, is starting to lean in on what it looks like to document that you actually have received the goal of the program or enrolled in the program. And again, this is from an outcomes perspective, because if we think about the outcomes of interventions, the outcome is not the refer to, the outcome is enrolled in, right? Referral is the beginning of a journey of navigation for the patient, what happens, or the client or the person. So the actually receiving the service, getting the thing, being enrolled in the program is the final goal. So we're working on those concepts within Gravity at this time. Next slide. I'm now going to pass the mic to the amazing Sarah Bahal, who doesn't often come on to the mic, but the next area of work is her area of work and our friend Tamali's area of work. So I wanted to center her. Sarah, are you ready? Awesome.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay,
Hi,
go.
everyone. Mhm. All right, so then I'm going to discuss the deliverable created as it relates to the program term analysis. So what Gravity has created is a lexicon of human service and social care programs and professions. This lexicon is available on the Confluence, and as detailed on the slide, we created this lexicon really to create a view of the programs and professions we've created so far in our journey with Gravity. And it includes the program, the profession name, definition, and reference links. And when in our approach to creating these programs is that like many of our programs are administered federally. So we tried to build concepts for each of these relevant federal programs, such as ones through HUD, through HUD and others. And we also tried to ensure multiple social care roles were represented in this as building the programs and professions. So it's available on the Confluence, and I'll put a link in the chat now so you can view it. And it's if you look on the Confluence too, it's one of the resources listed in our resources for implementation. And we welcome you to review it. It's both, you can see it like as a table listed here where you can filter in the table. And there's also an Excel version. You can click on this link here and it'll download onto your computer. So we welcome you to review it, review the concepts, definitions, and references, and submit feedback to the Gravity Project email address.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It was many hours of work to create this, and so I just want to elevate her. But one thing I want to note too, and we were just talking about this in the affinity group, when it comes to roles here, I know, so great. Brava! When it comes to roles that are missing on here, and we were just mentioning this in the critical role of navigators in the implementation affinity meeting, we can educate about a role within our current terminology structure, but we can't refer to a role unless it has a correlating concept within a different taxonomy of roles within healthcare that's governed by the National Uniform Claim Committee. Gravity is actively working with NUCC to enhance the role types within the role taxonomy to include social care roles. That's part of our job, right? So if you note a missing like role type, like digital navigator or housing navigator are two really clear examples of specific roles in the community. They're not here because we need to work to get the taxonomy to represent them. And then once the taxonomy represents them, we can then refer to them. That's partly because those roles are part of how claims and labor are represented within standards in the country, the NUCC taxonomy. And so, but just know that Gravity is working on that actively and has a meeting on it tomorrow, in fact, and we consider that part of our responsibility. Still comment if you have a missing rule, if you see a missing rule within your social care expertise, because that's just more evidence and more, weight to our need for enhancing the NUCC. But please engage in this. Again, this was meant for transparency because if you look in the terminologies themselves or in our value sets, you can't see the definitions and you can't see our references. And so it was hard for people to see, the background and the logic and the labor behind all of those programs. So this was created for that purpose as well. It is a lexicon indeed, a little dictionary of our 5 years of work. Any questions on this before we move on? Think we're good. Okay. Next slide. And Sarah B, thank you. And Molly, even though she's not here. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Now on to the classification. I don't think we have any classification. Oh, we have Nicole here. Hi, Nicole. Sorry.
Hello.
I just want to, sorry to call you in. I just did I was looking for a classification SME, and then I found my dear friend Nicole. Hi. I'm now going to go into some updates from program classification, and per our custom, we'll have an updated version of the classification available. But I also, based on last meeting, I wanted to give a little more clarity about how to engage in the classification. And based on some feedback we've gotten, I wanted to show a little bit of some of the logic decisions we've made in the classification for everyone's awareness. Next slide. So again, this is just what we're doing. It's very similar to our terminology creation process, except we're not actually creating as many terms. We're just creating a model of belonging of different programs to aid navigation and connection to services. Next slide. So this is like consolidated a whole bunch of information onto one slide. Our subject matter experts are experts in authoring and maintaining social care program classifications. 211 LA, Find Help, Epic, Unitas, and 211 San Diego. The goal again is that open classification of social care programs and social care program categories and social care programs to enable navigation and connection to services. That is the mission. And the user is intended to be everybody, healthcare, social care, and people self-navigating. I just want to note that self-referral is something that Gravity has leaned into with friends at Together Now and representing in our last Connect-a-thon. So from a labor perspective, enabling patients to self-navigate is really critical, and the open classification is built with that use case in mind. Codified concepts will be representing the programs that are defined and available, and they'll be able to be leveraged for other purposes. We talk a little bit about how a program concept might be leveraged within enrollment, and we'll publish it, the structure of the classification in open format for use, and it's to be determined where. Next slide. This is the general logic again of the classification. So you have your primary need. Those correlate roughly with the domains that Gravity works on, right? And sometimes they're a level above, like food is a domain, housing is a domain. We're going to, on a future slide, we're going to go deep into all the different domains we've addressed so far, because we didn't show you that last time. And then we have general, like, what do I need help with about X as a kind of like a next level grouper. And then we go into the primary work to the project, which is marrying and merging all the program type groupers these different classifications have had into one consensus truth, right? It is a lot of work. We're not quite at a year. We're just under a year. In May, it'll be a year of working on it. But the primary area of the work is those program type groupers. Gravity plugs in because underneath those program type groupers are specific programs, and Gravity creates concepts for specific programs. And then I just want to note that there's a lot of enhancements and needs that we see for missing programs as we do this work. And I changed the slide a little bit, Nicole, because the truth is the 211 HSIS taxonomy has all of these levels, right? And so where Gravity defines things and where 211 defines things in that program subtype level, 211 and Gravity are like neck and neck. And then there's a further level of granularity that Gravity doesn't go to that starts to talk about programs for specific conditions or populations or subtypes. And that's beyond Gravity's ken. And 211 takes it from there. And Nicole, good, I got a thumbs up. Fantastic. And we don't represent the 211 HSIS taxonomy here because it is protected by IP. But we are leveraging the expertise of the 211 HSIS wizards within our work within the classification to enable, again, that seamless, elegant and navigation and connection services. Next slide. So we hadn't like really talked about what a first draft looks like so far. So we have two different types of work that we do. The first type of work we do is literally just laying all of the classifications up in a column side by side and rectifying like differences, right? So you have an Epic column, a Find Help column, a Unitas column, a 211 column, and we sit back and resolve differences across those different classifications. And so that's rough work that creates kind of a rough output. And then what we do later is go back and kind of review it in a second lens. We are dividing our work up into two different phases. Phase one has covered the following domains, and within a short period of time, we'll be able to exist as a really solid first draft. of those sections, and it's food, transportation, housing, utilities, employment, material goods, social connection and engagement, physical health, mental health, substance use, and legal help. It's a lot, right? And Devane, for phase 2, there's a whole bunch of other things that are coming in time, including disasters and safety concepts, but we've addressed financial assistance and we are working on direct care. More to come on that. But suffice to say, we've gone all the way through to financial assistance. And as we're doing new domains, we're also going back. And when we get all the way again through legal help the second time, we are going to do an intentional review with the community. And this goes in, so this is the next slide. The creation of the final draft is going back and reviewing. So since we last met, the SMEs have completed a review of an additional domain. So the version on the Confluence will include utilities. It will be added to the public Confluence page by end of day Friday per our normative process. In addition to these domains, so that's all happening every time we complete a domain. We release it to the public on the Confluence. And then once again we get through legal, we have a phase 1 intentional review that we are going to conduct just really to get like implementer eyes outside of this group, outside of our group on the classification. That includes 211 EPIC Collaborative, an initiative out of Wisconsin that is a multi-state initiative that works in marrying EPIC's classification and 211 HSIS classifications. And so they're a perfect intentional reviewer for our work. And then we're also reaching out to the Community Action Agency Data Interoperability Work Group, because community action agencies are the connectors of all connectors. And so they are another good intentional reviewer. Our classification leads themselves are also going to be disseminating phase 1 amongst their users for feedback. And we also have key stakeholder users we're going to be reaching out to, such as SAMHSA for the mental health and substance use elements. Again, all SAMHSA programs we tried to represent them intelligibly, but we want to make sure that we do direct outreach to entities that are really, knowledge experts and content experts, especially since it's new work for Gravity, but just as we did basically with HUD when we did housing, or USDA when we did food. Does this process make sense? Again, we're trying to both be convenience review, great, come to the meeting, download the Confluence, but recognizing how important it is, we really are doing these intentional reviews as well. And so once we get through our second review up to legal, we are engaging the 211 EPIC Collaborative, CADIA work group, and key federal partners for a very specific either top to bottom review or a topic review like SAMHSA. And again, noting all of the not included in here is the reviewers of the users of the classifications who EPIC, Find Help, 211, Unitas, etc. Because all of them have separate work groups for their classifications as well. Okay, good. All right. Next slide. I just wanted to go a little bit, this came up in a Levitt Partners meeting on housing concepts the other day. We haven't really talked about how we model sensitivity to navigation and connection to services in this meeting yet. We talked about how we have the general domain problem, the what about blank do I need, and then the groupers, right? But in our subject matter expert meetings, we do a lot of discussion about is this the right way for a person to get help for this program, right? And so I wanted to just spend a little bit of time, because especially with things like housing, there's places you go to get help that you usually have to go through, or it's just so complex that you might need navigation. And so those themes are in our classification as well, and we're just going to walk through it. Because again, the intent is it's like a patient could self-navigate if needed. Next slide. I forgot that I built in a little whatever cascading thing. So Gravity just fundamentally already creates program concepts at the level required. This is going to slow this down for specific enrollment and monitoring to support program requirements. There's a lot in that sentence. Understanding how people have to be evaluated for eligibility and enrolled in a specific program is the level that Gravity builds a term for, right? So that logic is already inherently part of everything Gravity does. There is a senior farmers market nutrition program. There is a single room occupancy program. There is a non-emergency medical transportation program, right? So within Gravity's lexicon that Sarah showed, already we build the program with the definition that you enroll in. So all of that logic is already part of Gravity's work, right? An example of that is ensuring all HUD programs as defined within the Homeless Management Information System are distinct and represented, right? Because we do not fundamentally, this is part of our principles and drivers, we do not want to disrupt the work that social care experts are doing, engaging and enrolling people in services, and that knowledge already exists. Hi, Corey. Bring it. Help me stop talking.
Yes. No, it's fine. Can you, I think, you made a statement earlier about sort of where the program classification terms leave off and the 211 classification picks up with more granularity. And
Yeah.
and then in this case, you're talking about sort of more granular. Can you kind of, I'm hearing some overlap there. And can you help us differentiate the types of program classification terms we're talking about here versus what,
Yeah. Yeah, it's abstracting.
211?
Yeah, so I think, well, I can't talk about 211, but if we go to the next slide, I think it might be helpful. I start showing things. Hi.
Oh,
So
perfect. Thank you.
yeah. It's like the breadcrumb, and then so again, I cannot represent 211 knowledge here because it is licensed, right? I encourage everyone to sign up for a 211 HSIS license. It is amazing. I have one. I love it. I go there all the time. It's a fount of wisdom. Nicole, you can tell Maribel I made a plug. But I can't represent the IP of 211, but I can start to talk, and we're going to walk through how it manifests over the next couple slides. So everything in bold is the work that we're doing in the classification. Those are the concepts we're creating, and those are the concepts that marry the logic of what Find Help has, what Epic has, what 211 has, and what Unitas has, right? They have concepts at this level. They're just different, right? And so we're making them the same, right? And sometimes it means we have to make two from one or one from two, but the work of merging things is here, right? So because of the complexity of housing, what's unique about this is and this is kind of Corey, so it's like stage 1 and stage 2 to answering your question. We had to build a housing navigation section of the classification because housing almost always requires navigation. It is complicated, right? And so we have housing navigation program here. The reason why there's not a housing navigator is because there's no NUCC role for housing navigator. We are asking for it because a housing navigator is a thing and they're very helpful, right? They're an expert in navigating housing. We also, again, for the purposes, and we were talking about this on the Levitt call, like in order to get into the Homeless Management Information System HUD pipeline, you have to go through a coordinated entry program, right? So we built for the purposes of it, like trying to assist and like work within the systems that exist, and again, leverage what we know about social care so people don't hit dead ends. Like we built these concepts for coordinated entry program with a grouper of coordinated entry assessment and enrollment. Again, that's the groupers for navigation. And then next slide. You can start to see, Corey, so here's an even better example of how you can see the facet is, what about housing do I need help with? I need help with subsidized housing programs. And then the groupers are what the classification drills down on, right? So this is what the Marys, what Find Help has, Epic has, 2-in-1 has, and Unitas has. Rent payment assistance, mortgage payment assistance, foreclosure counseling, subsidized housing applications, and subsidized housing listings, because it's, you have to go through the public housing agency or the tribally designated housing entity or the community land trust to get to those programs. So we want it to be really clear that if you're applying for X, go here. If you're just looking for housing and you're already eligible, because you can go, like, for instance, for all housing choice voucher eligible houses in my city or any city, you can type in your zip code and HUD pulls out all the different rentals that are available within that program, right? So I can I can use the classification to get myself in the pipeline by going through the public housing agency, or I can use the classification to find listings for the house that I need. And then to add on, so then Corey, like in addition, so these gravity's level is all of the concepts that are not bolded, right? And I sometimes I'm like, this is the nerdiest meeting of all. And then in addition, you can imagine specific housing types for specific populations, right? Or subtypes of programs. That's a level of granularity that 211 HSIS has. Nicole, can I call you in for a second? Do you want to go further on that? This might be a good slide if you want to answer Corey's question.
Yeah, I think you did a really great job explaining. And I guess if you're comparing this list here to 211 HSIS, I could say that, like, in general with 211 HSIS, we have up to 6 levels of granularity. And so here, for the purposes of the Gravity project, we usually have 1 to 2 layers, and then not drilling down into additional levels of detail. And like Sarah said, some of those levels of detail are going to be either subtypes of a program, or it could be subtypes in terms of addressing specific populations.
And the reason why this is knowledge for a specific, this is a classification for a specific purpose, but towards the global goal of enrollment, the knowledge that 211 HSIS is able to represent is actually like really critical for closing the gap, right? So if I am a specific person and I have a specific housing program that I'm eligible for, I want to, like, that's important to know from an enrollment and engagement in services. It's just higher levels of granularity than we offer within Gravity. Corey, did that answer your question?
I think so. I definitely understand the classification, the program for navigating purposes, and that part is very clear. I think it sounds like, for enrollment and eligibility purposes, there are different granularities of codes needed, and in some cases, Gravity has developed those codes, and in other cases, 211 HSIS has additional granularity. That's kind of what I'm taking away, but no need to belabor. I can study this a
I
little
can just
more.
add one more thing to that,
Yeah,
Corey.
yeah.
I think you have that right. I think it's like, because to the point of the granularity is typically when you get to the actual, like, what are the actual services in a community and actual specific programs you can apply for. That's where you get that intersection of, like, who you are, your circumstance, and all the other eligibility criteria. And a lot of times how you describe services, and that's like kind of the 211 level of granularity, is getting at that, like, that what it is intersects with who it's for. And I think that is that's kind of other ways that I think like how we drill down to that is kind of what 211 is particularly good at. But there's this it is kind of a second layer of, like, that who is it for, and sometimes it's baked in, but a lot of times it's like we're really trying to, I think, initially stick to the, like, what is it, more than who is it for, even though actual services are both. Sarah, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, and very rarely do we break that, and an example of breaking that is on the next slide.
Thank you.
Next slide. And again, so Corey, and I want to note too that like, you know, gravity's, who knows where the next 10 years will bring us, right? But this is working within what we've got. I just want to note there are some rare examples where we do actually specify programs for specific populations when the population is required for the definition of the program. And this is unique. It does not happen very often, and we're very careful. There's like a, now within our work, we actually literally have population, like someone calls out, like when someone suggests level of granularity, it's like, it's a population is what walks us back off the plank. But we did specifically within housing, because it's actually really, it's a whole different subtype, create supportive housing for specific populations, including federally funded supportive housing, board and care, group homes, independent living facilities, et cetera. Other types of healthcare centered and health related residences are in the health section of the classification. But this is an example where we did, Lena, break it here, right? Just this once.
Housing breaks every model. Though.
Housing breaks everything. Yes. But the reason why we went through this today is mostly because it's important to know, like we haven't actually sat very long with how we think about the end goal, which is like connection to services within the classification. And here's some pretty good examples. Like when we feel like that, when it's so complex that you need navigation, we called that out, right? And we have that with benefits navigation in general as well. When you have to go a certain way to connect to the program, such as with public housing agencies, tribally designated housing entities, etc., we called that out, like apply here, right? This is how you get there, right? And then separating that from actually finding an apartment. And then when it was very specific that elements of the person define the program for housing, we called that out as well. And I just hope that it was like a little overview on how we consider enrollment and eligibility and the complexities of navigating the system when we're building our classification. Any general questions? Probably there's lots of questions, but you can see this mostly because it's hard, I think, to look at the classification as posted and understand some of these logical decisions, like the why we did it that way, especially with housing. So at least when you review the classification tomorrow, you can know that this is all behind there. Lena, Nicole, anything else to say? Smart friends? We good?
No, you got it.
Go team. Okay. Nerdiest bunch of friends, man. We all have just the nerdiest time. Sorters. Okay, next slide. I just tried to bring this back again, Corey, kind of anticipating your question, right? So how does the granularity play again? So we have the primary need, housing, facet of the need. What about do I need help? What about housing do I need help with? The grouper, which is what we're primarily working on, marrying between all the different classifications. Then gravity comes in, and then 2-in-1 and beyond, right? And gravity and 2-in-1 again are sharing this level. Like 2-in-1's all of these things, but gravity, the specific programs and are relevant for 2-in-1 as well, of course, because everyone needs to know about SNAP. Everyone needs to know whether you're in a single room occupancy program or a rapid reentry program, right? These are all core programs with definitions and boundaries that we share across our classifications. Okay, nerdy times. Next slide. We're almost done. Any questions on that part before we go to the next? Okay, next slide. I just wanted to quickly, before we left, and remember, so actually, before we go to the classification, the next classification, including utilities, will be available on the Confluence in the classification section tomorrow, end of day. We're trying to get through our review up to legal help, and then we're going to do that phase 1 intentional review with the 2-in-1 Epic Collaborative, Patio Work Group, SAMHSA, like end classification users from each of our different SMEs, etc. So that's all happening over the next weeks. Next slide. I want to just spend a little more time because we raced through it before leaning in to the last section. Again, program enhancements has 3 sections. Program analysis, analyzing our programs for sufficiency and correctness. Program classification, which is building that classification of open care, of social care programs for the purposes of navigation and connection to services. And program documentation, which is consensus on how we are going to document that someone has the thing or is enrolled in the thing. And it's really about outcomes, right? So the goal of this area of work is to develop concepts for the end result of interventions. Again, we touched on this briefly. I really just want to use this section of this meeting when we have it to really kind of like brainstorm about what's missing and what's needed. And so we all agreed that we're going to build in enrolled in blank program concepts when it's relevant. Not all things can be enrolled in. But we knew we're going to do enrolled in blank program. Hi, Lena. Fire it.
No, it's just a question. You can finish your sentence.
Oh, okay.
Here, I'll just tell you. My question is, do we have temporal concepts baked into the concept of enrollment?
Oh, you mean like temporal
Like if it's
status?
one time versus ongoing, like case management for 6 months versus ongoing food bank enrollment where I get a box of food every month, or it's one time, rental assistance, one time dollars, or, like, do we have a temporal concept that moderates this?
That is a really good question. It's something we're going to have to talk about because that came up directly within our work with supporting New York with their waiver and what they wanted and what we were able to do because of the boundaries of the terminology that we were working within. I think we should probably think about, I think someone sent me a question regarding that as well recently, but we'll have to sort that out as we go forward. We have limits. We can't, like, for representing time as a pre-coordinated concept in the term is complicated, right?
Yeah, I know. We ended up in our own system just reducing it down crudely to one time versus ongoing.
Yeah, and we took that approach a little bit with New York, and I don't know if the brilliant Monique Van Berken wants to be called in here, but we'll have to have those conversations here, and I just want to keep on having it so that we figure out and we start like bringing examples back to all of you, right? Because what we have to do is analyze our lexicon, right, and figure out which ones qualify for ongoing enrollment, right? Which one or qualify for enrollment in general, because not everything is a program you enroll in, right? And then we have to bring them back to you all for consideration. Does that make sense? I hope. Lena, I hope. And so okay, great. Okay, so again, all towards, over the course of this, this work aiming towards June, having a solid set of concepts that represent outcomes for each of our programs so that we can use them within our work. So we decided to do both. Both have a program concept of some type that can have a status. And this is kind of the way, again, a med list works. You can imagine like a program list. And this is what care managers and case managers and like community health workers do every day within care plans, is develop a list of the programs the person has, but it's usually free text. And there's lots of different options for developing this within our health record friends who are eager to adopt standards for saying a person has this. And then also developing the pre-coordinated concept. Yes. You mean, oh, sorry, Jonathan, I'm gonna need you to help me understand what you mean by that. What do you mean? Like
so you showed earlier in the presentation like a workflow, right? Of how you go from one to ICD-10 to
that's available on our Confluence on the overview deck. Any member community person can download it and have that model.
Oh, that's outstanding. Thank you so much.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, core base materials, rinse and repeat. Okay, next slide. And then yeah, so and it's just if you are moving it around, one of the things we're trying to do is keep it on the Gravity slide, just so in the Gravity logo, just so people know where it came from.
Yeah, no, I don't want to take credit for it, but just it's better than what ChatGPT gave me. ChatGPT gave me a bunch of Latin nomenclature that nobody knows because Latin's a dead language, right? So I'll give you proper due credit. Thank you.
That sounds awesome. Us credit. We are us. We are gravity. There's no me. It's us. Question about the term. Thank you, Sarah B. But can I have a no, that was not this one. So Beth Franklin's question. Hi, South Carolina. Hello. Question about the term enrollment that may or may not be applicable for many case managers, at least in South Carolina. They're applying for a program and not able to enroll someone. No, it's not actually. Beth, that's a really good question. So we already have really kind of leaned into the labor question, the labor element with our gravity concepts. For every program that there's an application process, we already have an assistance with applying for blank, right? And what we were talking about, and I kind of fell on like, it's interesting that this problem also exists in clinical practice. We just don't talk about it very much. Like I prescribed a bunch of medications yesterday. They're on the patient's med list. I heard back from the insurance company that they're not able to get them. So they exist in a moment as if the patient has them on a med list. And then I hear back that the patient can't get them, right? So the interesting nature of this kind of like in process towards enrollment is something that we, even in healthcare and clinical practice, is not really accurately modeled, if that makes sense. But we do have currently applying for concepts, and we also are trying to consider eligible for, like when they meet, it doesn't really qualify with SNAP because when you're eligible, right? But sometimes, like I think about kiddos who are eligible for a school lunch program and they're not enrolled in it yet, right? So we haven't applied for concept, to answer your first question, Beth. We are considering how to represent eligibility whether it's within a term or within a model, for that middle step, and then enrollment would be the final moment. It's not the activity of enrolling someone that's captured separately. Beth, did I do a good job answering that question? I hope I did. You can feel free to come off. Hi. Did that make sense? I hope it did. It's nice to see South Carolina thrive here.
Would the enrollment code and definition then be used by a state agency?
Well, this is actually kind of what we were talking about before. Sometimes gravity is creating concepts that don't exist in other terms. But you can imagine enrolled in blank program being a type of an outcome that's able to be, like, let's think about WIC, for example, right? Like enrolled in WIC is a critical concept to share on a care team across an entity. When we say state, what do you mean? What do you mean by, what do you mean by state? Like who, what's the use case?
So in my mind, the way that we work specifically at SC Thrive is that we have the community-based organization, or even like an FQHC or a hospital system, using our software to do the SNAP application.
Yeah.
But the only agencies that can actually enroll them are like the DSSs, the state agency, in that manner.
Correct. Yeah. So this is where, one of the things we clarify is we're not developing standards to complete the enrollment, but you can imagine if you were connected to an HIE or somehow able to have an interoperable exchange, you can imagine an entity, a state entity, being able to use the enrolled in blank program to communicate back to the care team. That's possible. Right? We conceptualize in Vermont using the enrolled in WIC programs for communicating back to referring providers for that same purpose, right? Because as a family practice clinician in rural Vermont, great. Like I refer patients to WIC all the time, right? Like all the time, for every eligible kiddo under 3, it's like, bam, go, please, right? And so communicating back to me that they're enrolled is critical for me understanding what my patients have, as opposed to just having the patient have to tell me, Yes, possible. Go team. Okay. And so anyway, what we talked about, began to talk about last time was that enrolled is not sufficient to represent the end outcomes for all kinds of things. And really the housing use cases, as per usual, makes it very, very plain. Like I think if you just think about the housing choice voucher program, right? We talked about this briefly last time, and Lena, you and I went nerdy afterwards with HMIS concepts, right? But I can be enrolled in the housing choice voucher program, right? I have my housing choice voucher. It can be years before I actually have a home, right? It's not doing me any good, right? So for some programs, we're going to have to consider a different end outcome. And likely for some programs, and the kind of, Elena, this goes back to the one-time versus ongoing. Sometimes you're just giving someone something. Sometimes the outcome is not enrolling in a program. It's here's your here's your 1 month's rent, provision of payment for 1 month's rent. We built a lot of concepts to support the New York waiver on that model. It wasn't an ongoing program. It was specific for the waiver. It was specific for in lieu of services. It's a one-time thing, right? So for those instances, what we used was a provision of concept. If it's a one-time delivery of X, and then that would be an end outcome, right? So as we do this work together, and you think about the program analysis and all those programs together, and we start bringing in like these final documentation terms to you all, we just hope that you all can help us refine them over the course of the next months. I hope that all makes sense. I see, it seems like it does. Again, this is all for documenting the outcomes of the work that we're doing, because ideally, patient record is containing a list of the things a person has, right? And ideally, the list of things a person is eligible for and don't have yet, because that's the work we do in care management, case management, social work, like community health workers every day, closing the gap. Eligible for, but not enrolled in. If you think about specifically, Jess, I think we talked about this last time, the SNAP gap among older adults in the US, so significant, right? If we think about simply, we call it closing the SNAP gap, eligible for SNAP, not enrolled.
Sarah, one thing I'll just say, you can shoot this down, but
no shooting down. Yeah.
So one of the things we ended up putting in, and this actually came from, because there's someone is eligible, but they haven't done any of the things, or nothing has happened to get them to making that happen, right? But we do have in our system, because it came from providers who are this person's submitted all docs, has done all verification, is considered fully eligible, and as soon as essentially availability is opens, this person will be getting these services.
Yeah.
So in our system, that's actually considered our technical concept of a wait list.
Mm-hmm.
It's fundamentally for all intents and purposes, this person is going to receive this service because they've actually done all of the eligibility and enrollment procedures and processes.
Yeah.
And not just that they could access it, but they've essentially completed the process. It's just they can't actually get it yet because there's not enough money or whatever the variable that makes the wait list happen. So we do distinguish between likely eligible, because we know hey, they're categorically eligible because they have many we know that they would get SNAP, but versus someone who's actually applied and done everything.
Love it. Okay. So that's kind of where does that fit in the model?
I would just kind of maybe put that as a conditional state of enrollment. Sorry.
Well, again, I'm always trying to think of a clinical use case. We do that for clinical trials, right? This person is awaiting the next clinical trial, right?
Right.
That's not, that's again, I'm always trying to think about the clinical use case, just because does it exist? Are we already doing this? And that's an example of that, right?
Yeah. And the one it was born for us was this organization called Operation Hope that does different kinds of supportive services for housing shelter and DV and IPV supportive services. And so it's it was kind of born specifically from capacity, but recognizing that someone they want to get them started on as soon as the capacity opens up, that they're there, kind of thing.
Yes. And so I think that's because when we talk about capacity, we don't often talk about that some programs have capacity and some don't, right? Some programs, if you're eligible for, you got it. Like, like SNAP's an example. I mean, its capacity might change significantly over the course of the next chunk of time. But right now, if you're connected, you're connected and you get money, right? Same thing with like the WIC farmers market, like the Older Adults American Act farmers market program. But some programs literally have capacity and there's a queue, right?
Yeah, it's like the difference between a benefit and a program, though, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
sorry. Okay, I promise I'll stop now.
No, stopping. This is what we had a light meeting. This is why we're going to get into it. And then love it. And then Marianne, I just want to know, yes, thank you. That's lovely. Marianne Berger, it's nice to see you here. I appreciate that. The patient reported and then the difference of those two different outcomes. One thing I just want to note that is another consideration is like solutions we've had to establishing enrollment in other areas were sharing panels of patients. It's not dissimilar to how you query like an accountable care organization for a panel of patients that are enrolled in the ACO as a clinical entity. Some of the things we were talking about with WIC last year and the social care voice co-design last year or the year before, it's all a blur. We're like sharing panels of patients with WIC, right? So WIC knowing that they all know that I'm the PCP for the patients I'm referring to them. That's part of the care they're giving and what it would be like to share a panel, like to have them communicate that these patients of yours are enrolled. We've talked about that as well as just like a early stage possibility for communicating enrollment, if that makes sense. And that might relate, Beth, to the South Carolina Thrive example, is because that's a fairly easy, like almost like a registry list to share, the same way that I go to like an immunization registry or a different registry in a state-based, like a state Medicaid like website as a clinician to learn things. Like I can learn who's been given a ASQ by anyone in the community because there's a code there. But anyway, those are possibilities, because the truth, just trying to state the base truth is this is the goal, right? Connecting people to services and communicating that to the benefit of the patient. I think that's the end of our agenda. And I said we'd be 40 minutes and we used up a whole hour. Next slide. Yeah, next slide. All right, so homework. It's a little bit different. Yeah, Sarah B already updated it. Review the lexicon. You're amazing, Sarah Hall. Please look and disseminate that lexicon. If we're missing critical programs, we want to know. There are a whole host of new programs coming out of our partnership with the CDC to build, to enhance our housing concepts. Those were just submitted to SNOMED just this week. And so brava to the Gravity terminology team who did all those CDC housing program enhancements. But review the lexicon of human services, social care and programs, review the definitions, see if the programs you need are there, let us know if they're not. And we'll do that work over the course of the next months. Review the draft program classification master file. That's going to be posted to the Confluence by end of day tomorrow. And if there's no further questions, we will close a little bit early, give you a little bit time back on your Thursday, and see you in 2 weeks to do enhancements. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Go team. Any other questions? No? Okay, see you in 2 weeks. We'll see you in 1 week. See you in all the weeks. Bye.